South Africa is currently experiencing the devastating effects of climate change. Heat waves are becoming more frequent and dry spells are lasting longer, which is affecting crop yields and leading to livestock losses. Furthermore, food insecurity and price hikes are becoming a common occurrence, while vector and waterborne diseases are on the rise now, both in frequency and in intensity. Now, to help us make sense of what is currently happening, Professor Tafadzwa Mabhaudhi, Professor of Climate Change, Food Systems and Health with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and an honorary professor with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, joins me now. Prof, thank you so much for your time. So just perhaps let's start with you unpacking the relationship between adverse weather events and patterns that we've been seeing, as well as climate change.
Okay, thank you very much for having me on the show. So when we talk about climate change and adverse weather conditions, it's mostly a matter of frequency and intensity. Weather, as we know it, has always been there. It has always varied. For example, it's always been hotter in February and March, but with changing climate, that heat is now worse. It is now more intense. It is now more prolonged. The same thing with the El Nino cycle, which is explaining our current weather system right now. What climate change has basically done is to intensify the current El Nino, which means it has been warmer than it would usually be during an El Nino season. So the frequency and intensity of weather extremes, be it temperature extremes, be it dryness, be it floods, it's those extremes that are increasing and the intensity that is increasing. And the challenge then becomes that the systems, whether they be natural systems, whether it be infrastructure or people or livestock, we have not adapted well enough to be able to then cope or manage with these changing circumstances or realities on the ground.
I would imagine, the importance of early warning systems is that much more important, given this uncertainty. At the moment, we're hearing, of course, of a level 6 warning, including disruptive rains that have been issued for the northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as other areas, in terms of severe heat. Just talk to us about the importance then of these early warning systems in as far as, helping authorities to make sure that they, as far as possible, they can get ready for them.
So we talk of early warning systems, but before we get to early warning systems, we talk of, anticipation, building anticipation, being prepared, and then there's early warning, and then there's early action. So early warning basically enables early action. For example, the level 6 warning that has been issued by the South African Weather Services for disruptive rainfall, more than 100 millimeters in parts of northern KwaZulu-Natal. And the Provincial Disaster Management Center and KZN COCTA have been able to deploy early action in terms of having their assets on the ground, being aware, being prepared to evacuate people in low-lying areas, also disseminating information to people in the affected areas or areas that could be affected. So that then mitigates the impacts. It doesn't mean that we are not going to have flooding, but it means that we can save lives and property and assets because we can act early. So under these conditions, early warnings become important. But more important than early warning is building preparedness and anticipation so that as a nation, as a society, we are prepared that these events are going to become part or have now become part of the norm. It has been flooding more frequently, we get droughts more frequently, and we have people dying due to these disasters more frequently. So we should only be acting or running around when an early warning is initiated, but we should be acting prior to the event happening, ensuring that people and assets are out of harm's way, investing in resilient climate infrastructure, restoring the natural environments, and making all the necessary steps to ensure that we mitigate the impacts of these disasters on people.
Now, just to that point, in terms of just the level of frequency in terms of what we are currently seeing. There is, of course, concern of food insecurity. I mean, just another story that we are tracking for our viewers today is what's happening in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwean officials saying the country will be importing genetically modified maize this year as a result of the unprecedented dry spells, that's led to bulk of their maize crops also being completely written off. Just give us a sense then of how likely this could occur in other southern regions as a result of, just some of the severe weather patterns that we are currently seeing.
So, there's a looming food security crisis in the region as a whole because of the El Nino that we are currently going through. Zambia has already declared a drought. Yields for maize are going to decline. South Africa already has stated that they're expecting declines of yields of about 13%. And South Africa is the regional bread basket. Zambia is the second bread basket, and then you've got Zimbabwe, the three main maize producers in the region, and the yields are affected there. In South Africa, whilst we have enough to meet local demand, the surplus for export is going to be reduced, meaning that South Africa's capacity to assist its neighbors is also going to be limited. Then there are other broader implications in terms of countries, whether they actually have the money to import this grain to make up for the deficit. So there are budgetary implications in terms of availability of funds, which usually means remobilization of funds. So already we are faced with that looming crisis this coming season. I'm sure there are already calls for food aid to come into the region. But the important thing really is we need to be better prepared, because as early as this time last year in February, we were already talking about the super or strong El Nino that was coming. So it was known a year ago that there's a strong El Nino coming. By June, we were already starting to see the impacts in the Northern Hemisphere with heat waves in the Northern Hemisphere, wildfires raging through the Northern Hemisphere. So we had time to build preparedness, we had time to anticipate, but for a lack of what I don't understand myself, we find ourselves caught in this situation where we are now having to respond to the situation. And then our efforts are always more on the response aspect and less so on the preparedness aspect. That it actually ensures that people don't have to be exposed to such a food crisis in the first place.
Prof, thank you so much for unpacking all of that for us. One then becomes clearer in terms of what South Africa can do in order to protect its status of being a regional bread basket. Of course, that was Professor Tafadzwa Mabhaudhi, Professor of Climate Change, Food Systems and Health with the London School of Hygiene Medicine.